Hello, everyone, my dear friends. Today I'm doing something I last did back in my Balatom's time. That's about 3 years ago. I last did this, and that is I'm making cheese. Yes, today I'm making cheese.
And how it came to this or why I took such a long break, well, of course, I had other things to do.
In summer, it's too hot, but the main thing was actually that I hadn't known a reliable milk supplier until now, where I could practically, as I did at Balaton, buy milk fresh from the cow, for example, and then process it further because the store-bought pasteurized milk and so on isn't so good. You have to do even more with that. Well, I finally managed to find someone right here in the village who actually sells the fresh raw cow's milk. And because of that, I immediately went and picked up a good 20 liters of it for myself just this morning. And right here, I'm holding the cheese culture. And I bought this right here in Hungary. You can also Google it. There's at least one online shop here for everything related to cheese making, specifically the cultures. And these are also enzymes. I want to make Gouda cheese now.
So I'm going to show you right now how I actually do this.
And of course, these are Gouda cultures for Gouda Trappista Schuit, which is the Hungarian cheese, or Edam. It's all the same, just the same cultures, but only different processes for how it's made. That's the really important thing, the culture. Then we also have these enzymes. I haven't actually done anything with these enzymes so far, but somehow, well, I just bought them along with everything else. Perhaps the cheese shop simply sold them to me as an extra. They were quite lucky to have sold them to me. They mentioned that there would practically be some secondary flavors there. Fades out, so that's why this is happening now. So I'll now pour these 20 liters or so into this pot and heat them on my gas stove to 32 degrees. That's 32 degrees. And then we'll see what we'll do next. All right. See you soon. Yeah, my pot that I was using earlier was just too small. It simply couldn't hold the full 20 liters. That's why I've now gotten myself a much larger pot, and I've warmed the milk up to 32 degrees Celsius, and I've now sprinkled the enzymes and the Gouda culture right here on top.
1 minute has now passed. You let it steep. So you just sprinkle it on top first and let that steep for 1 minute. And now I'm going to very carefully stir it all in.
Stir it in well, so that it's truly uniform and consistent throughout in every single part.
So I think we can safely say that this part is now completely finished. And what do we do now?
The entire thing is then covered with the lid. For 45 minutes, this will need to steep, and then we'll see each other again.
All right, so the 45 minutes have now passed, during which the cultures and the enzyme have had ample time to properly distribute themselves throughout the milk here. And now it's time to add the rennet, specifically the cheese rennet. We'll be using exactly 2.4 milliliters. For 10 liters, so for 20 liters, I took 4.8 milliliters and dissolved it in cold milk. Yeah, this is now the very next step, so that the cheese can become firm, meaning the milk will curdle, and then we can slice it up nicely. I've dissolved the 4.8 milliliters of rennet in cold water, and this will now be poured nicely over it. It's also important to note that after these 45 minutes that we waited, the temperature of the milk is still at 32 degrees, and I just briefly warmed it up again because it had gone down to 30 degrees.
However, that is something one really needs to consider. And now I'm going to give this a good thorough stir right here.
Okay, so... And then this is how the entire operation proceeds.
The next thing we have to do now is let it rest for another 45 minutes. So I'm going to put the lid back on it and let it sit for a full 45 minutes. And then after a period of around 45 minutes, the cheese will have become firm enough so that I'm able to cut it into individual pieces using a cheese knife. Right, then we'll meet again shortly for the next step. Yes, I've let this rest for 45 minutes, and it's really firm in its consistency. You can't see it too well here, but I've just cut it now. So, the practical task now is to cut the pieces, and you could, of course, use a cheese slicer for this purpose, but I personally never did it that particular way. Instead, I would always cut it both crosswise and then lengthwise with a knife, meaning I sliced it horizontally. And now this needs to rest for 10 minutes. You should let it rest like that. And after that, for another 10 minutes, I'll turn on the gas a little bit again to warm it up a bit more, because maybe it's now less than 30 degrees. So I'll stir it a little bit again. And then it gets washed. This is Gouda, practically the Gouda recipe, but we'll get to that shortly. Then we'll move on immediately once I've finished washing the cheese. All right, I've let it rest for a bit, and now it's time for the cheese washing process. What that means is I've taken about a third of the way from here using a ladle and transferred it into that other pot over there. And I certainly don't want to just throw this away, so I'll be giving it to the chickens because they are really going to enjoy it. But I'll just fill this pot with 38-degree warm water and put it back here. And then I'm going to stir this for a little longer, and then it goes into the mold. So I'll be right back, and it will be pressed.
So it is completely done now. I have just finished putting the cheeses into this mold right here. You can see it for yourselves.
And then, of course, it's weighted down in the traditional way with a stone. That's the best method for this. And the whey is still continuously draining off. I'll just turn it over in about 2 hours, and then I'll press it from the other side. There's plenty of whey available even for the chickens. That's really not a problem for them at all. Yes, so then I've just pressed this material here into the buckets, giving it various shapes. Here is yet another one. So that's completed for the time being.
And yes, we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
I hope you enjoyed the video. Otherwise, please write to me if you also make your own cheese. Or do you perhaps make it differently? Or how's that? Otherwise, like the video, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.